If you're thinking about moving to Maine, chances are you're going to be driving on Route 1 a lot. And we get a lot of feedback saying our driving tours are really helpful for people trying to figure out exactly what town they want to move to. So without further ado, we're going to drive on Route 1 from Kittery all the way through Kennebunk. We're not going to touch Biddeford because then you kind of start to get closer to the city, and that really deserves to be a video all on its own, but let's get into it. All right, so right now we're currently in Kittery. Kittery is about a town of roughly 11,000 people. So all things considered for this area, it's a good sized town, but it is important to mention that it has a lot of amenities and not a lot of amenities at the same time. There's tons of restaurants here. We're right in front of the Kittery outlets right now, so obviously the town has that going for it. And Kittery has some like mom and pop grocery stores like the Golden Harvest, Carl's Meat Market, Terracotta Pasta Company, Beach Pea Baking, which are all within, you know, a tenth of a mile of one another. But all that said, there isn't like a more traditional commercial grocery store in this town. So if you want to buy something like, say, Cheez-Its, you're going to have to either drive into York to go to York's grocery store, or you can drive across the border into New Hampshire. We are in the southernmost town in the entire state right now. So you could cross the border into New Hampshire and go to Market Basket or Target or something like that. So there's a lot to do here in Kittery. There's a lot of amenities here, but it's not really your traditional grocery store, Walmart, Target, that sort of thing. It's more mom and pop. And this town, a lot of the towns are going to be roughly around 11,000, 10,000 people kind of along the strip that we're going to drive through. So that's pretty standard. Kittery has a great school system. All things considered, it's a great area to live. All of these towns definitely look a little bit different along Route 1. You know, you're going to get a lot of the businesses and stuff like that. And driving in and around the different neighborhoods could be a whole different video on its own because, like I said, the towns do look quite different. But we're going to stick to Route 1 today as a lot of people use this for their daily commute. Pretty much all of the errands you run are going to be right along Route 1, and it's a pretty critical area to get to know. All right, so we just crossed the border into York from Kittery. So York is a town of roughly 14,000 people. It's a little bit bigger than Kittery. Again, it has a great school system. And one thing York has going for it is it has one of the major hospitals in the area, York Hospital. So that's definitely a big plus to living in the area. If you have health issues or if, you have young kids and this is a concern for you, it's a great area to move to. There's some beautiful, beautiful neighborhoods in York. As well as that, it also has its own grocery store, which a lot of people find weird that I point out in these videos, but the truth is not every town in Maine has a grocery store. Sometimes, depending on where you live in the state, you're going to have to drive upwards of 30 to 40 minutes to get to a grocery store. That's not the case in Southern Maine, but that's definitely the case for people who live in Northern Maine in places like where my grandparents live. So all things considered, it's a great area. There's lots of businesses and small mom and pop shops along Route 1, maybe one or two more additional amenities than Kittery. But again, if you want to go to, say, a Walmart or a Target, they don't have one in town like most of the towns in the area. So you're going to have to drive either into Sanford or, Biddeford, or cross the border from Kittery into New Hampshire. All right, so now we are coming up on Ogunquit. Now, Ogunquit is a town of about 1,500 people. It's definitely the smallest town that we're gonna drive through today, probably the smallest town in the area. That said, Ogunquit is a very, very touristy area. Now, so is all of really the coastal York County area. The entire thing's touristy. Ogunquit in particular, though, it has a great beach. It has restaurants right on the beach. The downtown is within, I don't know, like 2/10 of a mile from the beach. So it really is a great setup for vacationers. So because of that, it does get a lot of traffic. It's a great place to live. It's a beautiful place to live, but you have to be willing to put up with the traffic that comes with living here. Not only does Route 1 run right through the center of Ogunquit's downtown area, but it's essentially the one vital road that the town needs for anybody to get anywhere. So it's also important to note that there's not a single gas station in Ogunquit. There is not a single grocery store in Ogunquit. There's really not a whole lot of amenities, period. This Cumberland Farms you're gonna see over here on the right, it is a Cumberland Farms, but it's not actually, there's no gas there. And there is a small market in the center of town that we'll pass here in a second. But they do sandwiches and they do have a couple of things that you might see sold in a traditional grocery store. But I wouldn't really still call it a grocery store. It really doesn't have much at all. Down here is a lot of local restaurants, small local businesses. There's a great theater up here on the left. All in all, it's a really cool place to live. It's a very expensive place to live. They share a school system with Wells. So if you're thinking about moving to the area, it's definitely important to visit in the winter as well as the summer. I say that kind of across the board in York County, but Ogunquit more specifically because the population does fluctuate, not from like 10,000 to tens of thousands, from literally 1,500 people to tens of thousands of people visiting every single year. So it's important to kind of see what it looks like in the dead of winter as well as maybe in July or August. Again, I think it's a great place to live. I myself would love to live in Ogunquit, and being that it shares its school system with Wells, you know, some of my friends lived in Ogunquit, the sense of community that I think the residents, at least who have children growing up in the school system, they get a lot of their sense of community from being kind of attached to Wells. They used to be the same town. I'm not quite sure when it split off. But yeah, great area. A lot of it shuts down in the winter time just because the tourists are gone and there's so few residents in the town that actually live there. So just keep in mind, you're going to have to drive into neighboring towns to pick up like groceries or really do much of anything in the winter time. All right, so we just passed the border from Ogunquit into Wells. So Wells is one of the towns that I grew up in. It's a town of roughly 11 or 12,000 people. And it does have more amenities than, say, Ogunquit for sure. There's multiple grocery stores, gas stations, plenty of shops along Route 1. Now, Wells doesn't have a Walmart or a Target, and none of the towns that we're going to drive through today do. Like I said earlier, you really do have to drive into Biddeford or Sanford or over into New Hampshire or even all the way up to Portland to kind of get to those sort of things, unfortunately. But Wells does border Sanford, which has a Walmart and has a few more amenities, as it is actually technically a city in the state, which the parameters for that are not very high to be a city. I think you need, like, I don't know, maybe 20,000 people, if that, in the state of Maine. Our largest city is only 67,000 people, and Wells is probably one of the more, if not the most affordable coastal town that we're going to drive through today. Affordable is really kind of a loaded term in this sense. It is, you know, a coastal town, so it's going to be a bit more expensive, but all things considered, Wells is probably the cheapest of the coastal towns that we're driving through, and probably in York County in general. Another thing I forgot to mention about Ogunquit is the fact that there's no highway exit. So all of the towns that we're driving through today have an exit or a ramp to get on and off the highway. Ogunquit does not. So not only does it have very few amenities, it's also a little bit difficult to get to. You do just have to get off the highway in another town, but it's not as convenient to get home, say, if you're traveling. It's easier to get into like York or Wells versus you have to get off on one of those exits and drive inland to get to Ogunquit. Not really a huge deciding factor for if people are moving to the town, but it is something to consider, and it is one of the reasons why Ogunquit gets so backed up and does get some traffic.
Sometimes there's no one else who loves me like you used to. Sometimes we're not ourselves, there's no one I can turn to. And I know all the feelings that we shared are in the past. And I know your relationships are never meant to last. And I'll take some time, but I'll be alright. We're moving on, we're moving on. I know time
Okay, so we just entered the town of Kennebunk. So Kennebunk is a town of roughly 12,000 people. It has one of the best school systems in the entire state of Maine. It was ranked #1 a couple of years ago. I'm not quite sure what it's at now. Regardless, it's a great town to live in. Very, very pretty. It has probably maybe a similar amount of amenities to, say, a town like Wells, whereas it has grocery stores and plenty of different local businesses. It doesn't have the same amenities we've been talking about, but it does border Sanford and Biddeford, which are two cities here in Maine, in York County, Maine, both of which have a few extra amenities that some of the smaller towns nearby don't have, in addition to extra grocery stores and stuff like that. So you're probably wondering if a lot of these towns have so few amenities, and some of them are further from hospitals. We might have walk-ins or urgent cares, but we're far from hospitals. There's not a lot of grocery stores, not a lot of options. Why do people choose to live here? And the answer to that is pretty simple. There really is such a high quality of life here. And the towns that we're driving through, while Route 1 probably looks pretty industrial, they're incredibly beautiful. They have great neighborhoods. They're right on the ocean. They have great school systems, and overall, people just really love this area, not only to vacation in, but to actually move to. Kennebunk is an incredibly highly sought after town to live in. It is a bit more expensive. Kennebunkport, and Arundel really all are. Those towns in particular share a school system. Kennebunkport is easily the most expensive of the three. But in a lot of different areas of this town, kind of off of Route 1, are very picturesque. They're beautiful. They have these old, New England homes. And that's really what a lot of people are looking for when they're thinking about moving to Maine. They want, the picturesque kind of coastal aesthetics, image that they have in their head. They want to live that every day. And while life is not like that every day, the towns certainly look the part in a lot of different areas. And a lot of the towns really are kind of the perfect example of small town living, and kind of those small coastal towns in, Maine, or even a lot of times, coastal York County is compared to Cape Cod, or just a lot of other small coastal towns. But it really is kind of that picturesque image of the coastal aesthetic, or, those small, quaint little coastal towns that you see in different people's videos online, Kennebunk and Kennebunkport, and a lot of the towns we're talking about today, but this area specifically is kind of exactly what people are talking about. All right, so we're starting to approach kind of the end of our drive here, and obviously this doesn't really give you a full picture of what it looks like to live in any of the towns that we've driven through today, but it does give you an idea of what Route 1 looks like, what kind of your daily commute might look like, where different grocery stores and things, where different places really that you might shop at are located. We've done driving tours of different towns in the past, and the feedback really has been that the driving tours are incredibly helpful for people trying to figure out exactly what town they want to move to or look at, just because Google Earth doesn't always really give you the best idea of what it's actually like to drive through the different towns. And if you have specific questions about specific towns, feel free to reach out, whether you're moving to the area in, 6 months or 5 years from now. It really doesn't matter. We always have a million recommendations and things that we can tell you about the area, even if you're just looking for, different restaurants for your next stay here, if you're thinking about maybe retiring here in the future. And if you want to see what specific towns look like, definitely check out our other driving tours. They're a little bit older, but you get the picture, and maybe we'll update them again in the future when there's more developments in the towns or different things to talk about. But that's what Route 1 looks like here in the coastal York County area. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll see you next time.